Hey, good morning, and welcome to the Kansas City Stars weekly meet and greet that we call SportsBeat Live, where we talk Chiefs football and the game coming up this weekend against the Carolina Panthers with the people who cover the team for the Star. And let's meet and greet them. Sam McDowell's here. Good morning, Sam.
What's going on, guys?
You sound good. Sam Mellinger, how you doing?
Doing well.
Great. Vahe Gregorian is here. What's up, Vahe?
Blair, I'm doing fine. I hope you'll take notice of my 1993 Big 8 Skywriters T-shirt, one of my newer T-shirts. I busted it out in honor of Billy Tubbs.
Excellent. Great call. I know you had a good time writing the memories of Billy Tubbs earlier this week. We had a great time talking about it on a podcast. And also, crashing the party, Herbie Teope is here. Hey, Herbie.
Peace. What's up, fellas?
This is streamlined.
We
are streamlined.
Herbie just zooms right into these conversations. It's great to see you, Herbie. As I said, Chiefs Carolina Panthers at Arrowhead Stadium at noon on Sunday. The 3-5 Carolina Panthers against the 7-1 Chiefs. Let's start where we always do and get a news update from Herbie. The Panthers and we talk injury report for the Panthers game. Let's start with the Chiefs. 2 players did not practice on Wednesday, and there was an interesting limited practice participant on Wednesday as well. Herbie, run it down for us.
Yeah, absolutely. The 2 players who did not practice, Mitchell Schwartz with the back injury. To me, it just makes perfect sense to go ahead and just rest him because the Chiefs are on a bye next week. So give him the extra week before you need him back in the lineup. Mike Remmers has been doing a pretty good job there at right tackle anyway. So I don't think we need to rush Schwartz back. Frank Clark, swollen knee. Coach Andy Reid said Wednesday that it was a rest day for him. So even though he didn't practice, probably just take it easy on that veteran. You know what he can do. Sammy Watkins, hamstring injury in week 5, missed the past 3 games, got in a limited practice on Wednesday, and we'll see what happens with him the rest of the week.
Okay, well, the one that surprised me a little bit was Frank Clark, but you just said that it's just some rest for a veteran, you think?
Yeah, because Reid actually said that. I think he said his exact quote was, "We're resting him," end quote. The other thing there from the injury report was, they did welcome back 2 players as well. Anthony Sherman is finally off the reserve COVID list, so he's back to practice. And then the rookie cornerback, L'Jarius Sneed, was designated to return. Reid did mention yesterday during his Wednesday press conference that he would return to practice, and lo and behold, that's exactly what happened. Sneed was out there.
Yep. Hey, listen, we welcome your questions and comments, and we'll get to as many of them as we can. Brian LeBurge asked specifically about Sneed, so maybe we'll see him back in action after that great start. 3 games played, a couple of interceptions, terrific start for the rookie. We're going to talk a little bit about the rookie class a little bit later today. So, hey, Herbie, while we have you here, let's talk a little bit about the Panthers, what they're about. I mentioned that they're 3-5, but they're getting a key component back this week.
Yeah, and it looks like they're going to have that elite running back, Christian McCaffrey, back in the lineup. During his teleconference yesterday with the Chiefs Media Corps, Matt Rule was specifically asked about him, and he said, hey, he looked good out there, but we just want to see how his body reacts. And when you have Christian McCaffrey in the lineup, that's a completely different dynamic to the Panthers.
What they're about.
Sorry?
No, you're good. Keep going.
Oh. That's a completely different dynamic to the Panthers offense that they've been missing since week 2. He suffered a high ankle sprain and then he's been out. They do have their own version of thunder and lightning going here if McCaffrey plays, because Mike Davis has picked up the slack there. I know it's easy to overlook the Panthers, but they have some weapons over there. Because if McCaffrey is playing, you've got Robbie Anderson, who's got 688 yards receiving. He's on pace for his first career 1,000-yard campaign. You've got DJ Moore over there. You've got Curtis Samuel and Teddy Bridgewater. He can make some throws. He's not Cam Newton. He's not going to give you that component on the ground, but Bridgewater can make some throws. So if you get McCaffrey back in the offense, that's a weapon that the Chiefs have to account for. He's elite.
When he's healthy, where do you rank him among NFL running backs?
Oh, easily top 5. Easily. easily top 5. This guy can do it all. He can run, and then the biggest thing that he gives them is out of the backfield as a receiver. McCaffrey allows the Panthers to be balanced, and that's the biggest thing to keep the defense on their toes, because you can split him wide. He's the kind of guy, kind of like the Chiefs like to use Edwards-Helaire, their vision to use Edwards-Helaire. McCaffrey is a guy that you can split up wide, split him in the slot. He's just a dangerous running back.
Okay, and you mentioned Teddy Bridgewater, who completing more than 70% of his passes this year. He's faced the Chiefs once in his career, which started, I think, in 2014. I'm going to ask Sam Mellinger if he remembers the one Teddy Bridgewater start against the Chiefs. May not. You may not. It certainly wasn't with the Panthers.
Yeah, no, I don't.
I remember.
Dang it. I failed.
Well, you'll what's that?
It was up in Minneapolis at the University of Minnesota, wasn't it?
Yes, he was he was the Vikings quarterback.
I remember that game very well. There were so many things that happened that day that Teddy Bridgewater starting just
that doesn't rank. But that was a crazy day for a lot of reasons, not the least of which the Royals were going through their postseason ALCS, right? They were between games against the Blue Jays. So you and I remember Sunday morning flew up to Minneapolis, covered that game at the University of Minnesota football stadium. It wasn't the U.S. Bank Stadium wasn't built yet, and so much happened in that game. But that was the last Chiefs loss before running up a 10-game winning streak.
Yeah, there were 3 things that stick out the most from that day, and none of them are Teddy Bridgewater. One was it was like 1,000 degrees below zero that day. I remember that. 2, I remember the Chiefs lost when their own linemen stripped their running back of the ball on a potential game-winning drive.
Donald Stevenson stripping Charkandrick West.
Yeah. And 3, we did the 2015 version of this here show in front of a garbage can.
Indeed, we did, because there was no way the Chiefs were going to recover from.
They were done. They were cooked.
It was over. Poor Therese. He was just lamenting. He's got another week of just covering the team by himself. And
yeah, you mean that literally too? Like there was a press conference or 2 where it was only him and Andy.
That's right. Yep, that's exactly right. So. And they had to fight through Royals traffic, to get to the get to the stadium. So, all right. Hey, Sam. While we're speaking, I really enjoyed your column today, and let's talk about that. It's a you may not realize it, but there are some things going on in the world right now in the country besides Chiefs football. And Sam, you touched on it in a column that like I said, I really enjoyed, and it has to do with a topic that Jesse Newell and I spoke about earlier this week, and how I just find that athletes and organizations are a little bit more politically active this year than they have been in previous election cycles, with the examples of voter encouragement by athletes, and just the physical presence of using their stadiums and arenas as polling places, which I think, that's like what a great idea. Why didn't we think of it before, sort of thing? And I'll guarantee you, if this continues to be allowed in future elections, I think it'll help increase voter turnout, just the ease of parking and going to a football stadium to vote. So what inspired you to write it, and why do the Chiefs seem to be a team where this works? Yeah,
well, here's a fun fact. The first person that I ever heard bring up this topic, of using stadiums and arenas as polling places, Scott Pioli, many years ago. This must have been like around 2009, 2010, something like that. And he's done a lot of great work, with civil rights and voting rights and all these things. But anyway, I mean, this is the first election cycle that I can remember. I mean, maybe I'm wrong about that. 2 years ago, I don't think they were using what was then Sprint Center or anything else. And it just hit me that we are so divided, right? That's not like a new thing. And the Chiefs are this group of people in this environment where families and long friendships are sometimes like splintered, or even worse. The Chiefs are like this hodgepodge of people like chosen because they've won the genetic lottery and, all this happenstance, and they're just there together in this locker room. And they've got some shared experiences by now, but in that environment where athletes have typically just ignored all politics and just said, I'm all about the ball. That's all I'm concentrating on 100%. They've dived headfirst into the most intense, divisive discourse in America, not just right now, but that I can remember in my lifetime. And while they're doing that, they need to work together and sacrifice, personal goals in some ways, or personal fame, personal shine, for the betterment of the team. And they've done it beautifully. They're 7-1. They're a lot of people, including me, and I'm not going to speak for any of you, but think they're the best team in football. And it just, when I think about this, I want to say, God, that's a template. Like, we can all do that, because we can all talk about things like respectfully and talk about issues. But I also know that that's not accurate. Like, they're the anomaly, like they're the exception. And then that's where it gets kind of sad for me that they've been, and that to me is the power of shared ambitions and shared goals. And that's why they're doing it. You may not have a Super Bowl on the line with your friendship that got broken up, but these guys do have a Super Bowl. I think that the power of shared common goals is pretty powerful. And I wish that was an example for the rest, like that we could have a more respectful political dialogue. But to me, it kind of shows how far we've gone.
What do you guys think?
I'll just chime in with a couple things. First of all, Sam, I thought that was terrific. I thought it was really sophisticated and thought-provoking in so many ways, because of the way you were able to apply it to the broader canvas of the world at large. And kudos. And it reminded me a little bit of something you did a few years ago. It was different, but reminiscent of it, when you got with Dustin Colquitt and Chris Conley. Two guys who are different sides of the political spectrum, at least as we understood it. And, you were able to drill into the things, the dynamics of a locker room, of a healthy locker room. Right. And I guess that's the bigger point. And in your column today, I think you made a good point about Clark Hunt's sort of consent in this. But I also think that the linking connective tissue, if you will, also is Andy Reid, in the sense that what Andy Reid is able to cultivate in there, and get through to his teams, and has been, I think, encouraged to do through Clark Hunt and Mark Donovan and Brett Veach. So all of it it's really interesting. And naturally, Blair, you already advocated this, but I certainly urge anybody listening to read that too.
Yeah, it is an interesting dynamic that, Clark Hunt has been a long and consistent Republican donor. And, we don't know Andy Reid's voting record. He's not whatever, but like he did publicly endorse and he was involved in a fundraiser for a Republican candidate for Kansas governor. We presume, we don't know, but I presume anyway, that Patrick Mahomes and Tyrann Mathieu are leaning left. And it really is interesting to me that those two groups of people are coming together. Now there's public pressure, right? Clark Hunt wasn't doing this 4 years ago. There's been some public pressure, so maybe you can be cynical and think it's just optics. And you can be cynical on the player side and think that they're getting pushed into this by some other people. But the fact remains, they're still working together. People that we presume, or at least I presume, vote very differently and believe differently politically. And it's a cool thing. They came together, and I don't know how many people, we could know how many people voted at Arrowhead, I think, but we don't know how many of those people wouldn't have voted otherwise. But it's more than a couple. And I think that's good for all of us.
Hey, one last thing, then I'll get out of the way. We saw the governor of Pennsylvania last night make a reference to a stress test, right, with lawsuits being brought and things like that. And the reason I bring that up is when you note that point about public pressure and all that, there was a time where public pressure brought about different responses than this. And I guess I think that's so public pressure or not, I think it speaks a little bit to, the idea that we can evolve, or whatever, for lack of a better term, that, we learn and we maybe we get better.
Yep.
First of all, Sam's column was
side in the NFL has to start with Colin Kaepernick. I mean, he started all this back in 2016, and you remember it in Seattle. Sam, when you mentioned everyone coming together, I think of Seattle. Richard Sherman, Doug Baldwin, Michael Bennett, all those guys spoke out way back when. Uh-huh. They had the support of the team. I think that's the key thing there. You mentioned Clark Hunt supporting the players. You mentioned Andy Reid supporting the players. I don't think we'll ever see this level of support in Dallas from Jerry Jones, but you certainly see it around some of these other teams. And this is the reason why they're able to use their platforms effectively to get the message out there. Come out and vote, and mention some of the issues that are dogging the nation right now. So a lot of that has to come in play. You got to have the support of your organization. But I think over the last 4 or 5 years of how where we are today in the National Football League with players using the platform, I always got to give credit to Colin Kaepernick. I know he's a dynamic person that a lot of people don't think too highly of, but he started this. It was all because of Colin.
I think two things probably stand out to me. Well, first of all, Sam's column's great, and the fact that he was able to sort of connect that to what's going on now in broader society, I thought was just terrific. But when you look up donors, Clark Hunt still did donate to Republican senator races this year, and for him to support what his players are doing, his message is this is beyond politics to me. And so that's one of my takeaways. My second is you've got to already have a strong locker room for this to happen. And so this also is suggestive of what the Chiefs already had in place before this. They were prepared to absorb an issue like this because of their leadership, because of guys like Tyrann Mathieu, Patrick Mahomes, and specifically Andy Reid. Because you can't form this together all of a sudden when you don't have that structure in place beforehand and then say, hey, let's make this work. That structure has to already be there, and then you guys can have a healthy conversation. I will say it was, I don't know if it was illuminating, but Patrick Mahomes did say they didn't talk, and Sam, you mentioned this in your column, they didn't specifically talk about the candidates involved. And so they did stop short maybe of that line that they thought maybe could cause a little bit more stress than the issues that they were discussing as a team.
Yeah, that last point is such an important one about, here I go with the analogies, right? But like if you're in a relationship with your spouse and it's a good relationship, and now one of you loses your job or one of you gets sick or whatever, like you can get through that, right? Like you can pull together and all that stuff. But if you're Rocky and something happens, like you might splinter, you might break up. And I think about that a lot, about the Chiefs in 2019 going into 2020 have never, since 1970, I guess, been in a better position to like come together and get through some adversity. And, if this thing hit in 2011, basically any time between 2008 and 2013, it might be a very different result. But that it starts. I really do like head coaches get too much credit, I think, a lot of times, but not here. I do think that starts with Andy and Mahomes and Matthew and Frank, like all these guys have a part in that, but it does start with the head coach for sure.
But it certainly doesn't hurt to have a mega superstar like Mahomes leading the charge there. I mean, think about the Players Coalition. When that video came out over the summer, the Players Coalition embraced the fact that Mahomes was part of that because they know that he is the face of the NFL. I mean, Roger Goodell, it's already, it's reported that Goodell reached out to Mahomes after that video came out. And that's the power of Mahomes. You also can't overlook that.
Yep. Yeah. It's different if James Winchester gets on there and starts talking, right? Like, there's not all players are created equal.
But we love James Winchester.
We sure do.
Yeah, we do. So,
but Roger Goodell loves Mahomes more than James Winchester.
Yes, they do play some favorites in the NFL. So, my bottom line is hearts and minds may not change, but they're open. Yeah, they've been open with the Chiefs, right? And And I heard earlier first for this show when Vahe called Sam Mellinger sophisticated. I believe that is absolutely a first. His
Not
right,
just for the show.
his writing certainly is, and we'll leave it at that. All right. Hey, let's switch gears. Hey, one of the strengths I think of this locker room, and listen, we all touched on it in some way. Winning helps. Winning helps everything. But one place where it seems to be helping is at running back, where the Chiefs bring in Le'Veon Bell. There's already Clyde Edwards-Helaire having a terrific season, and Herbie, you wrote about this today. What did you discover from talking to Andy and CEH yesterday?
I mean, it was pretty simple. I mean, it was I started off with Eric Bieniemy a couple of weeks ago telling us that Bell reached out to Edwards-Helaire to find out if it was okay for him to come here. And that, to me, that's always fascinating because you don't hear of that too often where a veteran, an accomplished veteran like Bell reaches out to a rookie. And then, so we asked CEH yesterday, and he said it was all about respect. It was a man-to-man thing, and it was all about respect. And you could tell that he appreciated that effort. CEH says, some of the things that he's picked up in just a short time they've been together is how to approach practice and, how to approach the game week. But the other thing that I found interesting was when Edwards-Helaire said it's also about competition. And hey, if these two players are pushing each other, that only helps the team, in my opinion.
And speaking of Edwards-Helaire, I did a little story this morning on I've been really impressed with this first-year class, the rookie class of the Chiefs this year. You remember after the Super Bowl, we thought they would lose some players to free agency. It turns out the only ones they lost were Fuller and Wisniewski. So at that moment, Reggie Ragland, that's right. But of the 22 that started the Super Bowl, I don't think Ragland started the Super Bowl. But he was he's a quasi starter. So the Chiefs were going to return 19 or 20 of 22 Super Bowl starters. What roles would first year players have on the 2020 Chiefs? Well, then things happen, right? Damian Williams opts out, and the Chiefs, just before that happened, the Chiefs drafted a rookie, a running back, with their first round pick. They draft a linebacker with the second round pick, and all of a sudden they're getting contributions from Willie Gay, L'Jarius Sneed, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, their fourth round pick, Lucas Niang drops out, but even the undrafted free agents, Tershawn Wharton, who I noticed this week via Pro Football Focus is rated the third best rookie defensive player this season. Tershawn Wharton, that's amazing. So, what does it say about the Chiefs that they're able to get this kind of production from a first-year class? I didn't compare it to other NFL teams' first, rookie classes, but I got to think that the Chiefs are maximizing their rookies as well as anybody this year.
I think so too, Blair. And just to tie together some of the stuff that all this stuff connects with, your question to Andy Reid yesterday about how the benefits of a Super Bowl winning locker room, right, coming into that. And Andy agreed with the thought, but also added a really important point, which is doesn't matter as much if people aren't willing to share and take people in. And look, from Alex Smith to Patrick Mahomes and all these other things, it's certainly been a pattern. And very interesting sort of inside out aspect of it is that Le'Veon Bell approach, kind of, coming into there, bringing something different than people might have seen him as, right? It didn't end well in Pittsburgh or New York with Le'Veon Bell. There was a thought that, how's he going to fit here exactly? And one way or another, I don't know if the reputation of the Chiefs locker room preceded itself and he just knew he had to, get into it right away, or if it was just the way he really is. But it certainly suggested a cultural fit right away. And so all that stuff seems to be, one big message about what the Chiefs represent.
Yep.
To your point, Blair, the thing that impresses me the most about this rookie class is the fact that they're producing without the benefit of organized team activities a traditional structured training camp. Because remember, this was an abbreviated training camp they went through. And to Vahe's point, fantastic point. You know, it comes down to, are the players willing to share their knowledge? And when we had Tershawn Wharton yesterday, I specifically asked him, you know, when did you know you arrived? And he pointed out his battles with Kalichi Osemele, which I found a little fascinating there, because now you have this proven veteran who's a blocker, and he's sharing stuff, and he's helping Wharton get better. And that's huge. That's just tremendous.
Look, the present of this the present of this team is built through their veterans that they have coming back from last year. But the future of this team is still going to be built through the draft. When you look at the contracts that they signed in this offseason, when you look at what the salary cap's going to do next year, they're going to have high dollar players that they don't have to deal with right now. And you've got to have the cheaper labor, so to speak, and that comes through the draft. And so, you know, the Chiefs drafted last. Obviously, theoretically, they should have the worst draft class in the league because of their positioning. You know, they identified guys that I think not a lot of other teams were on. You know, that they made a move to get L'Jarius Sneed earlier. They got Tershawn Wharton. I know some other teams were in on him, but they were able to bring him here partly because they had won a Super Bowl, of course. But the Chiefs scouting department and their pro personnel department are so into realizing that this is the future of their team. They still have to develop the players. Just because they have a really talented team in 2020 doesn't mean they still have to be looking towards the future.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Brian LeBurge says it's not just the rookies; it's second-year guys like Allegretti. And I was about to make that point. The 2019 draft with Mecole Hardman, Juan Thornhill, and Allegretti was a terrific one too. This was after a couple of years of not getting as much production out of the draft. You know, after Patrick Mahomes in 2017, Kareem Hunt was part of it too. But after that, not much. 2018, that was really not a great. It turns out, not a great draft for the Chiefs. But these last two, I think, have just been terrific for them. Okay. So we're at the midway point of the Chiefs season. Not everybody's in the NFL has played 8 or 7 games. I think everybody will have played 8 games. I don't know if there's a team that's played 7 with a bye week this week. I think after this weekend, everybody will have played 8. And time to do some mid-season evaluation of this team. But instead of doing the traditional, Herbie's going to get into it in a big way next week with the Chiefs. But I've noticed a lot of the national shows are talking about MVP and where Patrick Mahomes ranks in that race. And what I'm seeing a lot of is Russell Wilson, Patrick Mahomes, Aaron Rodgers. So it's 8 games in. I think Russell Wilson has some remarkable stats through 8 games, but Mahomes and Rodgers do too. Let's just keep it at this. Let's evaluate Mahomes. What kind of season is he having? The numbers suggest he's having a fantastic season. But is this even better than 2018 when he went for 50 and 5,000 yards? I'll throw it open to anybody.
Yeah, I feel pretty strongly about this. I think he is significantly better than he's ever been, and I think that includes that rookie season when he not rookie, but his first year as a starter when he won the MVP. Just because I think that. I'm going to use this word maturity, but it makes me laugh because, young Patrick or whatever. So now that he's this like grizzly 25-year-old veteran, but he's so good at avoiding mistakes and avoiding, like that risk reward calculus. Like he's always been really good at. When he threw 50 touchdowns, his first year, it was 12 interceptions, right? That's a damn good ratio. But now it's even better. Like he's figured out exactly when and where to move that line. And, I think it's telling, we've talked about this before, but I think it's telling that the one interception that he threw was on 4th down when they were down 8 on a play where we later found out the tight end ran the wrong route. And look, the Patriots could have had 1 or 2, just like everybody else. That's the one interception that he's actually thrown. And it was in that situation. I think that speaks a lot to sort of where he's on this, the risk reward calculus. He's also running the ball a lot more. 7, I looked this up the other day. He's got 7 third down scrambles for first down, which is the same number as Lamar Jackson. Pretty good.
Wow. It's not just that he's only thrown one interception. He's only turned the ball over once. And for a quarterback, I mean, especially one that's been pressured a lot this year, that's a pretty significant stat. To me, he's mentally better. And that probably sums up, I guess, what Sam said, but he's mentally better than I think he's ever been. It's really hard for a guy like Patrick Mahomes with his arm not to take the risk. Mm-hmm. And I think that just takes a mental approach that maybe a lot of young guys – and I mean, if we can still call him young Patrick at 25, that not a lot of young guys might have, especially when they've got his talent. I mean, we've seen all the different ways he can get a pass off, and it's got to be tempting. And for he's still like Sam said, he's not taking the risk, and it's because the way defenses are playing him, and because the way his own defense is playing. He says he doesn't need to, and doesn't want to are two different things.
Yeah, because you bring up a good point, because it's got to be super tempting for him, especially because he knows he could throw 6 really stupid interceptions and just kind of walk to the side like, that was fun. He's still going to be the quarterback. You know what I mean? Like, it's not. He's got to be like so super just self-disciplined on that. And his reputation coming out of college is so different than what we've seen right now in that respect.
One thing I want to just add to that, it's sort of just affirming what you guys said, but since he's been in the NFL, and part of this was just his own growth and maturity as he was coming along from Texas Tech to here, but part of it I assume had to do with his redshirt year with Alex Smith helping him. But when he got into his first full season as starter, you never could think of him as reckless. I mean, right. You could think he might take some chances then that he wouldn't take now, and Sam McDowell got into that pretty well with that story last week, especially with Sam. I love that one quote in particular about, he just said he's fighting his nature in some ways about, to sort of check it down a little. But so now we're seeing that he's gone from that to just a really more refined version of it as things get more and more difficult for him, really, right? There's more of a book on him. People are trying different things. He's had to win in different ways, be more patient, find his chances. I don't know. It's I find it hard to argue against him as the MVP. I get that he's the guy we see all the time, and we have a greater appreciation of that than we might with guys we just see on TV now and then.
One more point on this, Blair, is that last year when Sammy Watkins was out, there was some trouble with the Chiefs, and Tyreek Hill is getting defended in a way like he's never been defended before. You're without Watkins. McCole Hardman hasn't taken the step, although the last couple of weeks I think he's shown some signs. But early on in the season, he hadn't taken the step forward you expected out of him. Demarcus Robinson hasn't been as productive on a per-game basis as he was last year. And yet here we are talking about this guy being an MVP candidate. He also, he's missing his running back that he was used to last year. And even if you think the difference between Damian Williams and Clyde Edwards-Helaire in the running game isn't that significant, to me in the passing game, it's been a stark difference between those two guys. So I think there's a lot of factors maybe that haven't worked in his favor, and yet here we are talking about this guy in this way.
That's a good point. That ball he threw against the Jets last week, against his body to Hardman on the sideline, it looked like it went through a defender.
Yeah.
That was, that play won't get a lot of run because that set up the 4th and 1 that they didn't get, right? And but that play was just remarkable, absolutely remarkable. Who else makes that throw? I don't know.
Blair, I'll just say real quick. No, I remember saying, I literally said out loud to myself, how did he do that when he made that play? And then I kind of laughed at myself, like, why do I ever ask that question, even in my head?
Yeah, it was more than him too. Like, it wasn't quite the level that the Travis Kelce mic'd up from last year, where he's like, "How did you know that I shouldn't have done that? I've never done that before, but you knew I was going to do it."
Yeah.
It wasn't quite that level, but McCole Hardman had to read it as well, and he ran sort of across that defender, and then Mahomes had to throw it like through the other guy's body and everything. But It's interesting to watch those guys, and McCole Hardman's still a young guy, obviously. Like, just sort of grasp a little bit, like think on, they've got to raise their games, right? To think on on his level. And it's kind of cool to watch that happen.
Eric Bieniemy talked about that last week, specifically with McCole Hardman, is that they're working on him with finishing plays. And that was a great example of that.
Sean Schloss asks, we saw the Chiefs have some fun plays against the Jets last weekend. Will we see more of that this week, or a more conservative approach and try to win injury-free? Herbie, what do you think? I was a little bit surprised to see a fake punt against the Jets last week, and but I guess I shouldn't be surprised with anything, right? I mean, at least when you flash moments like that, it gives the other team something to think about.
Yeah, those fake punts though, it really goes down to what you've noticed when you look at the film, and so they saw how the Jets probably lined up, and they're like, this is the perfect time to call that play. As far as being fun against the Panthers, I don't think you can take the Panthers lightly. Well, not that teams take their opponents lightly, the Jets last week, but the Panthers are still a dangerous team. One of their wins, remember, they went on a 3-game winning streak, and one of those wins came against the Arizona Cardinals, who are doing pretty well this year. So I don't think you can go into this game thinking, let's get overly cute here, especially if they have McCaffrey back, because you got to play these guys straight up.
I thought the fake punt, Herbie's right to make the point that part of that's just preparation during the week, what you see. But I do think what was interesting about it, there was, and it was still the first quarter, I guess, and I think it was 7-3 at that point. And I thought it was kind of a statement about that we're taking this game seriously in a weird way, like a statement to the team, like we need to go for it. We need to get at it and wrestle this beast to the ground, and we're not taking anything for granted. And I think that is a harmonious message with how Andy's been able to keep them in the moment, so to speak. I don't think they approach the Jets game like, well, we're just going to win. I mean, I think they come to play.
Yeah, I also think that with this group, with the coaching staff and with the talent that they have, like their baseline for vanilla is like different than other teams. Like their base is just a certain level of stuff that makes you think, oh my gosh, wow.
Their vanilla starts with cookie dough in it.
Yeah, exactly. Like the I just keep thinking back to the Ravens game. That's Andy going all out, and to see that level, like that's sort of their okay, we came to play kind of deal.
I thought they were the Harlem Globetrotters that night. The stuff they were doing.
Unbelievable.
Kendall Gibson noticed, Chiefs have played tough first half of the schedule. Maybe Patrick's on pace for 4,600 yards, could get 5,000. I know we talked about the schedule in our post game on Sunday, but looking at it a little bit closer, the 8 games that the Chiefs have left, a little more interesting than I thought at first glance, with teams like the Dolphins and with Tua playing as well as he is, or seemingly playing as well as he is, and a couple other sort of, Tampa Bay is on there. Listen, Chiefs are still going to win the division, be in the playoffs, be a 1 or a 2 seed. I'm almost certain of that. But how does that second half of the season schedule look to you? Is it softer than the first half?
I'm just saying this off the top of my head without looking at it that closely, but I certainly think it's interesting that you've got games at Tampa Bay is a much more interesting game now than I thought it was going to be at the start of the season. And I guess obviously at the Raiders that'll have some intrigue, and I don't think you can assume it's a win just based on the fact they lost at home to them. Dolphins have gotten a little more interesting, haven't they?
Sure have.
So I don't know if you'd say it's more or less thorny, but I think it certainly has its challenges.
Yeah, there's definitely some roadblocks in there, and just like Vahe mentioned, coming off the bye, going to the Raiders, obviously Andy Reid's record coming off of a bye is phenomenal. So I don't think they're going to get caught flat-footed this time around against Las Vegas. To me, the 2 biggest ones, the Buccaneers and the Saints, 2 NFC powerhouses right now, and the Saints look like they're going to get Michael Thomas and Emmanuel Sanders back healthy for the stretch run. The Dolphins are definitely a different team, and so there's some roadblocks in there.
Yeah.
The other game that's a little bit different than the first half is just the Chargers. I think that The Chargers are a weird team to me. They're 2-5, but I think they play like a 4-3 or 5-2 football team. And heck, they've blown 4 straight 16-point leads. But that team is a talented team. And you got Justin Herbert, who had taken basically 0 first-team snaps when you faced him last time. Now they're going to get him in week 17 after he's played a full season. I think that game's going to be a little bit tougher than people think too.
It's interesting. They've got 2 teams in the second half, the Chargers and the Falcons, that absolutely don't know how to finish games. Have all kinds of problems finishing games. So, all right. So let's go with a second half of the season prediction record. Chiefs are 7-1 now. Who does anybody remember where they picked the Chiefs in the preseason? But if you do, I'd like to hear it. But failing that, just how about an 8-game record to finish the season, and that'll give us an idea of what we think. How about an 8-game record to finish the season and where they finish seed-wise in the AFC? Sam McDowell, why don't we start with you?
Yeah, I had them going 14-2 before the year, and I still think that's where they finished. Now, I thought they would lose to like a Baltimore rather than losing to a Vegas, of course, when you go game by game. But I still think 14-2 makes sense, and I think 14-2 would be the 1 seed. I know Pittsburgh's undefeated. I get it, but I don't think they're a good enough team to skate through the rest of the back half of their schedule.
How about you, Vahe?
Yeah, I like that. I think I thought 13-3 come into the season, but we'll know in hindsight. But I do feel like that first Raiders loss has a little bit of that. I don't know, the same effect as that Tennessee game last year. I mean, I think they knew they were better than that, and I think they've been more on point since then in a lot of ways. And I think that's the kind of thing that's going to carry them in some ways through the season. I just think they're kind of galvanized and more the team we thought they'd be now. And so I'm happy to go with 14-2. If I said 13-3 before, I'll make that adjustment. And I think Sam's right. I know the Steelers are in the pole position there, but I think that would mean the Chiefs get the number 1 seed.
They have had great focus since that Raiders loss. All right, Sam Mellinger, what you got?
I mean, I basically was just nodding along with every word that Sam McDowell said. I think they're the best team. I think they're playing really well, and not just that, but they're improving. I think they're better than last year's Super Bowl champions. 15-1's not out of the question, but I think it's a 14-2, maybe 13-3. But I'd put my money on 14-2. And the Steelers are really good. I'm not, they're obviously really good, but their offense is a little bit like it's not that dynamic. I feel like that might catch up to them. Their defense is great. They are tough. They're fast. They're smart, all those things. But I feel like the offense may catch up to them a little bit. And I do think they'd be the number 1 seed at 14-2.
Okay, Herbie, close it out.
I was probably the only dissenting voice who was nodding my head the other way when McDowell was.
You do that on reflex.
The Steelers are the number 1 seed. The Chiefs will take the 2. I like what the Steelers are doing. Maybe it's because I'm old school and I love defense and I just love the way they fly around. But I think the Steelers are going to take the number 1 seed.
Okay. 13-3, 14-2. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter whether the Chiefs play home or away. They're absolutely as good on the road as they are at home. And I think the Chiefs will be the AFC champ and be in the Super Bowl, whether they have to play a playoff game at Baltimore or at Pittsburgh or at Tennessee, anywhere. I just have this team is built to win anywhere in any condition. So, okay, that's going to do it for us today. It was great catching up with Vahe, Sam McDowell, Sam Mellinger, and Herbie Teope. And thanks for your questions and comments. That's what fuels this show. We will talk to you again Sunday afternoon after the Chiefs-Panthers game. One last thank you to Beth Welsh, our producer. So take care. Have a good rest of the morning, and we'll talk to you Sunday.